Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to, I guess, a bit of a continuation of a previous video that I did featuring my shade. For those who don't know, in MapleStory at the moment, we are having an event that is allowing us to hyperburn a shade or a run, which basically allows us to power level a character from 0 to 260, and every time you level up, you get a total of 3 levels instead. So you do end up quickly speed running your character all the way to level 260. And on a previous video of mine, I featured my shade, where within about 4 hours or so, I managed to get it from a freshly created character at level 0, and I got it all the way to level 260 using a lot of different resources in a sort of creative way, and eventually got it to level 260. And my goal with the character originally was to first get it to 260 and unlock its 6th job, which you get at level 260 of course, and then try to get the character to be as strong as possible to become a very reliable bossing mule. I really wanted this to be a continuation of the shade, but I came across a few problems with the character. First off, on the shade, it doesn't have any existing items. It only has the items that were given to it from the hyperburn, which are pretty reasonable of course, but it is still lacking a lot of different items, and it will take a bit of time for me to gather the resources to just get it started. Realistically, if you would like to try to get a character to become a bossing mule, you would like it to have at least some spares of Chaos Root Abyss armor, which obviously my shade only has the temporary gear of, and also you would like to work on things like accessories and then work towards armors like the Absolab set. All of these things would have taken at least a few weeks to set up on the shade from a level 260 character, even though it did get to level 260 with a lot of nodes, a reasonable amount of symbols, and of course, being at level 260, I would also unlock the 6th job advancement. There was still a lot of things that were required to set up the character in a way that I would be able to speedrun it to become a bossing mule. And I really wanted to showcase a video on my channel where I would bring a character from relative early game into becoming a really strong bossing mule. And what I realized is that I already have some characters on my channel that I featured before that have actually been played on enough where I could actually progress the character purely by brute forcing it. So unfortunately, this won't be a continuation of my shade, but instead I will be showcasing what I did on my mechanic to bring it from what was originally a normal Lotus and normal Damien mule all the way to Chaos Tenebrous. The first thing that I have to show is actually just purely the leveling up. The character wasn't very highly leveled compared to the shade, and I wanted to bring it up to parity. The shade started at level 260 with 6th job, and I think my mechanic, when I left off, it was level 250. So I wanted to train it from level 250 to 260, and thankfully I already had meso and drop gear, so it was just a matter of time, just slowly doing things like dailies, 7 runs of Monster Park a day, and a bunch of growth pots along the way as well. Eventually I did get to level 260, and I unlocked my 6th job. But that wasn't the only thing that I did in the early 250s. One of the biggest things when it comes to making a bossing mule is giving it the resources that it needs to get stronger. Because it was a pretty old character, I featured it originally maybe 6 or 7 months ago. I have been doing a lot of Chaos Root Abyss, I have been doing a lot of dailies, and I had a lot of spares for the items that I wanted to upgrade. And the first thing that I did was wait for the Shining event that came up, and I decided to full send about 70 bill onto this character. I'm going to show you guys just exactly what I did. Of course, I started off by star forcing the most consistent item when it comes to making upgrades on a character, and that was the Chaos Root Abyss gear. For Chaos Root Abyss, you just need to clear it on a weekly, and every week you get about 5 to 10 symbols, and you just slowly build up the spares required for this. And these are the best items to try to go for 21 early, because you usually have a lot of spares, and you're not worried about blowing them up. If you blow them up, it's a bit inconvenient, you do lose a bit of money of course, and a little bit of time to replace them, but because you have so many items of it, you just kind of brute force your way. For me, it did take a little bit of time from what I remember. It was a lot of money and a lot of booms to get them each to 21 stars. But that was just kind of the beginning. Once you get all 3 pieces to 21 stars, your character is already significantly stronger because each of the stars past 17 give you a lot of attack, and once you get to 20 stars, the jump from 20 to 21 is usually pretty safe. This is usually what I would do to get a new bossing mule up and going. So one of the first items that I decided to work on after my CRA pieces was actually an arcane glove. As I was working on this character, of course, I would like to try to find parties that would take me into the bosses that will drop arcane boxes. And I got really lucky on my mechanic. I think on the very first week of running CTene, I think in my Sea Gloom run, I did in fact get an armor box. So I did Star Force the glove from 0 to 17. Now, armor boxes are very important for progression, but for bossing mules, I actually only value the first one. I only really care about the arcane glove. The arcane glove is very effective when you combine it with an arcane weapon, and you only really need the 2 set. You can go for more than that, but the problem with arcane armors is the fact that it's really expensive to push them past 17. And there are some very cheap ways to get armor pieces that are better than 17-star arcanes. And that's what the following part is going to be talking about. With a lot of my mules, I think I featured it on my Xenon and on my Wild Hunter, I decided to try to push my Absolab pieces. The fodders required for Absolab include things as Ramaru drops. You can buy a lot of them from shops as well, and of course you can use Zakum capes, as you guys can see me star forcing here. I decided to try to push a lot of these fodders to 21 stars, and the reason for this is just to be able to transfer it from 21 stars onto a new Absolab piece, and then just leave the Absolab piece at 20 stars after the transfer. You can push it to 21, but of course you are risking that one tap blowing up, and you don't really gain too much from 20 to 21, so I was happy playing it on the safe side and just leaving my Absolab pieces at 20 stars. In comparison to arcane pieces, a 20-star Absolab is worth about an 18-star arcane piece. They're about a 2-star difference, and just thinking about the comparison and how relatively cheap it was to push a Abso piece to 20 versus a new arcane piece to 18, it is a lot easier in terms of both meso and in terms of spares. In between star forcing my Absolab gear, I also made some upgrades on some other items. One of the more notable items that I decided to upgrade was my Carnage treasure. Because I've been playing on this character for long enough, I have done Princess No a fair amount of times, and I did have about 6 rings going into this event. 6 rings is not exactly a guarantee to hit 21 stars, but because I think I was also kind of safeguarding them from 16 to 17, I wasn't too afraid of running out of spares. I had a reasonable chance of hitting 21, and thankfully I only blew up once compared to some of the other items. I think my Absolabs and my CRAs were very painful in terms of the booms, but it does get a little bit easier from this point onwards. So after I hit 21 star on my Carnage treasure, I decided to upgrade an item that I didn't originally plan too much on doing on this character, and that was actually a Meister ring. So prior to the event, I think I spent a few days just trying to get to Meister's accessory crafting with the intention of making a bunch of Meister rings. These rings are just as good as the Carnage treasure, and I had to take a lot of resources from other characters on my account to be able to get it to Meister's and then also get the materials required to be able to make a lot of rings. I only made 2 rings in preparation for this event, and thankfully on the second ring I believe, it did manage to also get to 21. I didn't really need to prep so hard with the Meisters in hindsight, but it is nice knowing that I do have extra spare rings and the chance of making more Meister rings if needed. After upgrading the rings, I decided to do something a little bit more boring and a little bit more on the safer side. I did have a few items that I didn't have too many spares of, and I just needed to put them to 17 stars. The first one I wanted to show is actually an item I got from a hard wheel run, which is the Twilight Mark. The Twilight Mark is a fantastic accessory that replaces a Zakum one, and it really saves me the effort of going for a Sweetwater tattoo. And the fact that it is a usable item from the Dawn set as well, so eventually if we do get a slime ring, we will be able to get a really big bonus. So I put that one to 17, and I believe I also had a Dominator pendant on this character from way back, and I decided to put that to 17 as well. And just to round out the 17s, I also had a Superior earring with no fodders, I believe. I just put it to 17, and that was it for pretty much the boring items of this video. Before I go on with the rest of the things that I did on the Shining Star Force, I wanted to actually show you guys a clip that I just found, which was kind of the reason why I really solidified my mechanic as the character that I was going to push to CTene, as opposed to my Shade. Not only was it a spares difference, it also had a bit of a fun item. As you guys can see here, my mechanic actually got a Pap Mark drop. I don't have the clip of me getting the Pap Mark, but it is an item that I would like to try to push. So I used a 17-star scroll that we had from the current event, and I put it onto the Pap Mark. And by a sheer miracle of luck, it did end up going to 21 relatively quickly. It maybe failed 3 or 4 different times, but it basically streaked to 21, which was pretty insane. And I think we did this on stream too, so that was a pretty awesome moment. And that was really the start of the mechanic. So I just wanted to show you guys, I guess, the origins of the mechanic getting all the money on my account for the 5, 10, 15 Shining event. And just to end off our Shining event, I did spend the rest of my money trying to Star Force my Pink Bean belt all the way to 21. I didn't have a superior belt at the time, but I felt that because it is a Star Forcing event, we might as well make the most of it and prepare for a sub drop. I'm treating the superior drops in the same way that I treated my Absolab. I'm just going to get the fodders to 21 and then transfer them over to a 20 star superior. The Pink Bean belts thankfully are very easy to get. They're very consistent fodder, much like the CRA gear. You practically get one every day and definitely more than one a week, as long as you do Pink Bean. And it was just a pretty straightforward 21 star for me. And it actually ended up on a pretty good note. What started off with a lot of explosions, a lot of booms, and pretty expensive star forcing for the most part. By the end of the event, I actually ended up pretty well ahead of average, I think. I roughly spent about 50 bill on star forcing on the mechanic itself. I did spend some money on other characters, so it wasn't the full 70 bill on this mechanic. But within 50 bill, I did hit all of my CRAs to 21 star. I hit 2 rings to 21 star, the belt to 21 star, and 3 Absolab pieces to 20. Effectively getting about 9 pieces to 21 star in about 50 bill. Averaging about 5 bill per 21 star is extremely good. Even though it was a Shining event, this number is not too crazy, but just considering that the variance wasn't too bad, especially considering the bad start, it ended up being pretty even, and I'm super happy with the amount of damage gained for this character. And just to round off, of course, after all the star forcing, I did have a little bit of money left. I did spend a little bit on cubes just to make the Absolabs usable, and I believe also the accessories. I just cubed them up until unique or legendary, just depending on what I felt like. If I saw good lines, I might have kept them. But yeah, that's pretty much the Star Forcing event. It was a fantastic event for me. A lot of money spent, a lot of tapping, and of course, a lot of fireworks. But by the end of the event, I believe my mechanic was sitting at roughly 20 mil combat power. So a pretty significant jump. I entered in at about 9 and basically doubled the combat power by the end of the event. But that wasn't the only thing that my mechanic gained within the next couple of days. The Shining Star Force was a significant part of the gains, but the drops that my character just kept getting over the next week or so was insane. Starting off actually with the superior belt that I was talking about. Unfortunately, I didn't record it on camera, but I did end up getting a superior belt, so my Pink Bean belt that I prepped to 21 star was pretty much immediately usable, which was awesome. Then now my mechanic's just basically farming coins off of Golix, which is pretty handy, and we don't have to really worry too much about that. We'll steadily get our way to 4 set superior, and that will also be a pretty big gain. After fixing up my potentials and transferring over the superior belt, on stream I gave an attempt at Hard Lotus and Hard Damien. Mechanic is a pretty fantastic class when it comes to both of these bosses because of its high damage uptime. Even though the class doesn't have very good burst, which is usually what people look for, it doesn't really matter because when you're soloing a boss, the only thing that's really important is your damage uptime, and Mech's damage uptime is one of the main reasons why I think that this class is really solid. Despite the fact that it is a 3-minute class with very low burst, because of the high damage uptime, you do have a pretty easy time surviving in Lotus. Your main focus is just to stay alive and just stay near the boss, and you'll just slowly chip down the boss. In combination with its pretty amazing mobility, just the fact that you can dash mid-air, change your direction, dash even upwards, and then float, Mechanic has a very, very clean movement, and I think that if you are willing to learn how to move on the class, it does feel very, very fluid to play. And on top of that, it even has a relatively short cooldown iframe. All these tools are pretty fantastic for dealing with Hard Lotus, even though I didn't have my 6th job, and the fact that I didn't have 4 set superior, and I only had 1 arcane piece, it was still a pretty clean run in Lotus. Again, it was just the damage uptime was just so high, I didn't have that much trouble dealing with the boss at all. I believe my first run of Hard Lotus took just about 20 minutes, which is a pretty fantastic pacing for a new character that just got its upgrades. Following up from that, I gave a go at Hard Damien. Now, Hard Damien is actually a pretty frustrating boss, as I'm sure many people have found out. Damien spends a lot of time in the air, and just basically runs around non-stop. Mechanic, on the other hand, because of its very high mobility and its relatively low burst, the pacing for the boss doesn't really change compared to any other boss. The fact that you can stay on Damien majority of the time, even though he jumps around, you don't really have that much issue dishing out all of your damage. All of your summons are pretty much always hitting Damien. Your main missile skills is always hitting Damien. When Damien goes up in the air, you can even just float beside him, so you're pretty much doing full damage the entire time, which is pretty insane. I did spend a lot of time in P1, of course. It was a very slow and tedious boss, not because it was hard to do the damage, but I just was actually kind of weak, and it just took a while to slowly chip into P2. Now, in P2, it usually gets worse. For most classes, they don't have tools to deal with the blue orb that follows you around. And as long as you're inside the blue orb, you do a lot less damage to Damien, whilst also taking a bit of damage. Thankfully though, Mechanic has an awesome summon that lets you teleport between 2 different portals that you can place down. And with this portal, you can absolutely cheese the hell out of Damien P2. Whenever you stand on the far right side, you can drag the ball as it follows you, and then when Damien reappears on the left side, you can immediately just take the portal and teleport away from the orb, and then having a good 10 to 15 seconds of 100% damage uptime. This in combination with being able to still attack him while he's in the air, and being able to get a consistent burst off every 3 minutes, Damien actually kind of went down faster than Lotus. I honestly believe that Lotus was a little bit more difficult in terms of damage because you have to avoid so many different mechanics, whereas Damien is a lot simpler, and all you really had to do was just move with the ball, keep the ball off of you, and burst cleanly. After doing my first hard Damien, I believe it also took about 20 minutes, and yeah, all it really took was my mechanic to have a really good star forcing event, unsurprisingly. It was very nice to see that all the money that I put in was immediately rewarded. Just being able to go from normal Lotus and Damien 1 week to hard Lotus and Damien the following was an amazing feeling. After comfortably being able to clear both hard Lotus and hard Damien, I was pretty sure that with my experience and with the damage that my mechanic is able to do, I would be able to join some random parties as well, so I didn't have to rely entirely on carries. As it was coming towards the end of the week, I wasn't able to join any friends' parties to be able to get carried through a lot of the CTene bosses, but what I was able to do was to join a few parties through the Party Finder. I ended up joining a few bosses. I joined a Lucid run, I believe, and also a V-Hiller run. The V-Hiller run is the one that I'm showing on screen at the moment because I just wanted to show that I was able to pretty comfortably green dot in this particular run. It was a 6-man party that wasn't too overly geared, so it was going to be a pretty long run. And what ended up actually happening was, because of how long it was and the relative party strength was actually quite low, we ended up dying out of the boss. A lot of people started dying out pretty early, unfortunately, and when it was towards the last bar of the boss, I did also die out along with the last guy. But the main thing that was important about this run was the fact that I could comfortably contribute to a boss, and I was pretty sure that as long as the boss run wasn't less than 3 minutes, I should be able to at least blue dot and get some chances of getting some arcane boxes, which was my main goal. And now, unfortunately, I didn't record the following hard V-Hiller run that I did, but I did end up actually running another party after the one I died out in, and cleared it with the 6 of them, and from the drops, I got a weapon box. It is pretty unreal that within 1 week of bosses, I was able to get a armor box and a weapon box. I didn't have to rely on the droppers for hard Lucid and hard Will to be able to buy the weapon, and I just skipped everything to be able to go straight to 2-set Arcane, which was pretty insane. I did a few upgrades on the weapon. I think I sent it to Legendary and gave it a reasonable pot, and the first thing that I kind of did was actually go ahead and finish the 6th job. I know I showed at the beginning that I power leveled the character to 260, but I got the weapon before 260, and this helped out quite a lot actually. It helped me with the training, and more importantly, once I did finish getting to level 260 and got my 6th job, it helped me a lot to fill out the stones. In Cernium, the mobs are actually quite strong, so I was very glad that this arcane weapon came just before doing the 6th job stones. It helped me clear the mobs a lot faster, and it was pretty painless, honestly. I think I finished most of the stones within about 10 minutes thanks to the 3x coupons and some VIP boosters, and honestly the cutscenes took a lot longer than the actual filling up of the stones. Following that, I did do High Mountain. High Mountain is a dungeon that you can unlock at level 260, and the reward for doing it gives you 40 fragments, and these fragments are really important for our 6th job advancement, and because I'm a fresh level 260, I don't have any access to fragments, and farming fragments early on is actually quite slow. I really wanted to do High Mountain so then I could get a good amount of fragments to unlock my masteries. which was my main goal. I wanted to unlock both of my masteries because they are my main damage skills, and I also really want to unlock the skill mastery for mobile missile battery, which is one of the most important skills from our 5th job. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. High Mountain only took about 45 minutes or so. Much better than most fresh characters would get because I did do a lot of upgrades on this character, and I was pretty happy just being able to get a pretty good jump start into my 6th job. Being able to get to 260 and pretty much immediately unlock both of my masteries was really nice. I did have the help of the previous event. We had the Blue Snake event, which gave us a lot of fragments, and I saved them for this mechanic. After unlocking all my key 6th job skills, I decided to spend a little bit of money re-rolling some of my gear. My accessories, a lot of them were just 18% or lower. A lot of them were unique, same with my Absolabs, so I decided to tier them up to Legendary and try to get at least 21% on most of the gear. I did end up with a few items hitting 3 lines, which was quite nice. I believe my Dom Pendant hit 3 lines, and I also re-rolled my weapon at this point. For the weapon, I ended up hitting 35 boss damage, 40 boss damage, and 10% attack. This is a pretty incredible weapon for bossing. I ideally was aiming for 2 lines of attack so I could use it for mobbing as well, but I'm not going to complain about 3 usable lines on the weapon. Thanks to the new potentials and also more importantly the 2 sets of arcane items, my character ended up shooting all the way up to 41 mil combat power. A pretty significant amount of extra damage. A lot of it came down to the boss damage that you gain from the 2 set of arcanes. I also have a 3-lined weapon, and of course I did upgrade my belt from a pink bean belt that was 21 stars to a 20-star superior belt. I also noticed that in this clip I have a weapon jump 3. I don't remember where I got the weapon jump 3 from. And as nice as it does sound, apparently for mechanic it didn't really add that much for me, so that was a bit of a null factor for what was going to happen in the upcoming boss run. And the first thing that I tried to do after getting all those 6 job advancements, all the upgrades on my weapons, was go ahead and attempt a hard wheel solo. I knew going into this hard wheel run was going to be difficult because I didn't actually have that much arcane force. I didn't have enough to have the full 1.5 times multiplier in the boss, so I actually had to put some more points into the event buffs to get more arcane force. And even then, that only put me over to 1.3 times, so I was still missing out on a little bit of extra damage for hard will. The most important thing that I needed to check was whether or not I could actually clear P1 comfortably. Usually the pacing on P1 will tell you whether or not that the boss is clearable. And thankfully, I did do enough damage to have a pretty comfortable split across all the segments in P1. The first split went down pretty nicely thanks to the Origin. The Origin skill adds quite a lot of extra firepower, and I managed to get into P2 with most of my lives intact. I entered P2, and with my entire Origin burst, I realized that this was actually a very clearable run. I just needed to make sure that I had as many lives as possible going into P3. P2 just kinda came down to having consistent damage, which is pretty easy for mechanic, while staying away from majority of the things that did damage. I just needed to make sure that my health was nice and high. I did have some very weak healing fams, which helped out a little bit, but for the most part, I was relying on the mechanic's ability to dodge as many things as possible. In P2, I think I even needed to wait out a little bit longer so then I could enter P3 with my Origin. It was really important to enter P3 with my Origin burst because P2 is a lot easier to kind of wait out in compared to P3. You are on an inherent timer on the 3rd phase. The webs do start to encroach on you throughout the entire fight, and just giving yourself more damage at the beginning will always help out. On my entry burst for P3, it was really nice because he gave me the poison right at the beginning, which was really easy to time with the rest of my burst. So the beginning of P3 was pretty much as good as it could possibly be. Now, throughout the rest of the phase, what I really needed to avoid was getting knocked back into the webs and trying my best not to take too many of the red pellets. The red pellets take away Moonlight, which take away your ability to cleanse in the fight, and at the same time, getting knocked into the webs makes you gain a lot less Moonlight. There are a few other mechanics throughout the fight that you have to watch out for. Of course, you have to watch out for the White Eyes Stomp, so then you don't just take a HP death. That is really important. And of course, you have to try to the best of your ability to avoid the little legs that spawn every once in a while. Thankfully, because of mechanic's really high mobility, it is able to kind of micro adjust its movement to be able to dodge most of the things that are oncoming. And because my class is a DPS class as opposed to a burst class, I didn't really have to worry too much about timing the poison. A lot of classes tend to try to sync up a lot of their skills for the poison, and for me, I just needed to stay alive. I just needed to stay alive, and eventually I'll be able to chip down the HP far enough to get the clear. At the pacing that I was going in this particular fight, it was going to take me at least 8 minutes to clear. And in my mind, when I hear that I have to stay in P3 for 8 minutes, the most important thing to do is to try to keep the webs as clean as possible. I needed to avoid as many mechanics as I could so my moonlight generation stayed up as high as possible, and I needed to conserve all of my lives just in case when I do get to the end, I might have to play out my lives. Thankfully for me, in this particular fight, Mechanic has a lot of really good movement like I mentioned, and I actually had a very comfortable run in this P3. I could avoid majority of the mechanics that would cause me to lose Moonlight, and a lot of the little legs that would cause me to stun Moonlight generation I avoided very easily. I didn't get knocked back too many times into the webs, and by the end of the fight, I think I spent about 8 minutes in P3 like I expected, and I didn't even web out. That was the most surprising thing to me of this fight. By the end of the run, I still had enough Moonlight to keep the webs away, which is pretty ridiculous. I only lost 3 lives across the entire fight. All of them were in P3, and overall, just an insanely clean run for my first clear. I think that was by far one of the cleanest hard wheel runs I've ever done in terms of a min clear. A lot of classes tend to have issues towards the end of the fight because you just can't do very much damage when you're off burst, but because Mechanic's burst is very short and condensed and is more or less a DPM class, it was very easy for me to just keep chipping at the boss and eventually get the clear. The following week I did hard wheel again. This time it was a little bit more disgusting. I actually didn't do my hold in P3 anywhere as close to the first time. I actually needed to play out my lives quite a lot, but we eventually did get the clear with 4 lives remaining. And in this particular run I actually got a ring box. These ring boxes are a rare drop from a lot of the Arcane River bosses, and the ring that I'm looking for this mechanic will be something like a continuous ring or a ring of restraint. And for this run, I managed to get a continuous ring 3. It is one of the best items I could possibly ask for as a drop for a mechanic. I think it only really gets beaten out by either a book, which is extremely rare from Will, or a continuous 4. I will take a continuous 3 and run with it. It is an amazing ring for this mechanic, and now it is sitting on such a good position. It is able to comfortably clear a lot of the weeklies. I was actually so excited with the continuous ring, I gave Hard Lucid an attempt. This is usually a boss that is not very easy for Mechanic, because Mechanic's burst is, like I said so many times before, it is very weak, and it relies a lot on DPSing. That was an issue that I thought I might have had in the last phase of Hard Lucid, where you only have 40 seconds to do all of the damage required for the boss. And thankfully, I think in combination with my 6th job, even though it was quite bare bones, and in combination with the continuous ring as well that I just got, I was actually able to clear Hard Lucid with a few seconds remaining in the final phase. And just to round things off with what I've done on this mechanic, after clearing Lucid, I went ahead and gave Sea Gloom a try. This run was actually going to be quite difficult because, like any other DPS class, this was going to be a hard run. My burst wasn't going to be very good for Sea Gloom, and all of my damage would have to come out during whenever the eyes opened. I tried my best to maximize my burst whenever the eyes did open, but it was just such a slow run. It was just a slow and steady chip throughout the entire fight. There wasn't anything amazing about the fight. I didn't have to do anything fancy. Darkness for Mechanic is a very easy mechanic to avoid, thankfully, thanks to its really high mobility. Again, it has so many dashes and it has so many floats. You can pretty much avoid most of the things that are coming your way in Gloom. I think for my Gloom run, it almost took the entire timer, but by the end of it, we did get the clear. And funnily enough, the only thing I really wanted from a drop for Gloom was actually the Estella earrings. I actually blew up my drop earrings while star forcing my superior gear, and unfortunately I did not get an Estella earring to repair that. So hopefully we'll get one in the future, but that is not really that much of a priority. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the progress that I've made on this mechanic. Ideally, I was hoping to make the Shade get to this point, but again, I didn't have the resources or spares to push the star forcing on that character, so I decided to pick up a existing character that had a little bit more resources to be able to star force with. And as you guys have seen throughout this video, it has made so many gains. It got so lucky on the drops that it really needed. It went from a 9 mil combat power, Lotus and Damien bossing mule, all the way to CTene. I think with a little bit more time and effort training up the character from perhaps 260 to 270, I'll be able to get a lot of fragments along the way. and that will help me a lot with the amount of damage that I will need to do further bosses. I do plan on trying to clear Hard V Healer at some point, but right now it's not quite there yet because the 6th job is quite low, and of course my Arcane Force is actually a really big factor. It is not quite there yet. It's nowhere close to being full. But these are just some things that are guaranteed gains and are just strictly time gated, and that is a good spot to leave a mule in, where all the gains are just very easy. I don't need to spend any more meso, I just need to actually do my dailies and slowly grind the character. And that is the end of, I guess, my mechanic. I don't really think I'll make any more follow-up videos on this character anytime soon. Maybe in the future I might consider pushing it to Black Mage, but that will be in the pretty far future for this character. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video, and I guess me showcasing pushing a character to CTene as fast as possible. It costed a total of about 70 bill across Star Forcing and Cubing and Flaming, and thanks to a lot of luck getting the drops that I needed, I was able to reach the goals that I wanted on this mechanic. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like, it helps me out a lot, and if you guys would like to see more content from me, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you all again, take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.